So giving a brief agenda, what we are going to talk and why this topic is important. So cloud IAM, why it matters, why it is of significance in today's world, being all the assets and applications and people are working remotely. So cloud comes into play, and that's when the security is important. What are the challenges that companies are facing? I can give an example of what we are facing at our current organization. What are the principles of modern IAM protocols? What are the best practices in the cloud? Some case examples of some of the sectors I have worked with, and what will it take away for all of you who are attending this session? So talking about cloud security shift. So nowadays, enterprises are moving to multi-cloud hybrid environment, right? So there's no talk about restricting the access within a boundary of the organization. So work is shifting remotely and hybrid. Apps are getting downloaded on cloud. People are shifting from on-prem to cloud. So the shift has been going drastically, and the traditional parameter of security is no longer sufficient. That's when IAM comes into place. IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. So it talks about how to control the access and how much access the person should get. So it's based on least privilege access. So based on, let's say, a certain criteria, what roles you're a part of, you should get a certain access, what applications you work on. So IAM is the new security parameter. So IAM, why it's important? It's central to securing digital assets. It protects digital assets. It controls who can access what and under which conditions. And this is something was out of scope earlier because people used to access a lot more things than they actually require. This, and as a previous panelist also talked about non-human identities. So this concept not only applies to human users, but also to machine identities and some service account which are non-human identities like APIs, bots, and some services that are used to connect multiple applications together or a user to an application. So we are talking about a broader concept of security in digital assets, not just the human identities. Secondly, IAM enables remote work and collaboration. Without it, enterprises could not support distributed teams safely. So it helps managing the user and the machine identities with enabling secure remote work and collaboration. And as we talk about all the compliance that are specific to some geography or some business sectors, it also supports compliance because it's aligned with what regulatory measures should be in place, such as SOX, GDPR, EU, and HIP, and other compliance in practices based on what industry we are talking about. So given the background why IAM in cloud is important, so we should also understand what are the various challenges that are being faced in the industry. So the major one is identity sprawl. So employees often have multiple accounts across various platforms, such as we know a couple of cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, Google Workspace, and having that multiple accounts has their own risks. So this is one of the challenges and compares to talking about identities and their access. The next one is shadow IT. So when it comes to SaaS applications, nowadays teams and organizations are using various SaaS applications, which are not completely managed because anyone can go and download that. So it's outside the IT regulatory. So it's IT oversight at times, and which leads to unmanaged and unsecure accounts. The next one is privilege creep. As I spoke about, IAM is based on the least privilege access principle. So one of the challenge that we face is in the organization that employees accumulate more access than they actually need. And that extra access is being overlooked, which is also a major insider risk. And the last one is the major that we spoke about earlier is the regulatory compliance. So when organizations do their audit requirements based on quarterly basis and yearly basis, so regulatory compliance come into place, and it takes into account all the challenges we spoke about, having multiple accounts, unmanaged applications, and excessive access and the roles and the permissions. So the compliance always adds pressure to this, as auditors always want to understand who has access to what and why. And in multi-cloud environments, where we talk about hybrid, public, private cloud, it's not easy to provide if we are not securing the assets and the identities. So what are the core principles that we are gonna focus on and that are more aligned with our modern IAM protocols? So the first one is federated identity. So it talks about SSO single sign-on across cloud services. So I'll give a simple example. Let's say we have a set of username password we use for logging to, let's say, multiple social media accounts. The same set, you're logged into Facebook and you use to log into Instagram. Similarly, in the organization, we have a username password that I use to log into a laptop and my Teams and Outlook, and the same credentials can be used to log into other applications. But when we do that, we also ensure that we have an authenticator in place. So let's say we would have heard about Microsoft as authenticator, Ping ID. Ping is a modern authenticator. There are a lot of identity providers. So once you try to access those applications, we just set username and password that you're using to log into your computer, Teams, Outlook, or any of the messaging chat that you use in an organization. So it goes through that authenticator. Once it's prompted, you authenticate, and that's when you get access to all the applications. That's what the federated identity does. It's tried to consolidate all the applications access through single sign-on. The next principle is least privilege. It limits what users should get and just in time. So they should get the access they need and only when they need it. So I can give an example of one of the tools that we use in our organization is SailPoint. It's identity and governance tool. So how does that work is you go and request access for a particular application. It goes through multiple level of approvers. And it's also important to know who is going to approve, because they should have the access to understand why this application is needed. And there's also an option to restrict the duration for which you need the access. Because I would need an access to deploy some project, but it may not be throughout the year or throughout the duration of my work I'm doing. So it could be for a day or for a month. So least privilege ensure that you know what access you get and for how much time. And organizations are using various tools, like I talked about SailPoint. Previously, it was Savian for governing the access. The next one is zero trust. So it talks about never assume trust, always verify identity, device health, and context. So one of the tools that organizations are using is privileged access management. That's an important pillar of IAM. And we use CyberArk, StrongDM, and other tools that talks about zero trust. So in that case, what happens is the passwords for privileged accounts, let's say you are going to use service accounts or some elevated accounts that needs to be secured and could not be accessed by a regular password. So in that case, what organizations do is, like with StrongDM, your password gets rotated every 8 hours and you have to re-authenticate it. So the password get vault and you are not using your set password. So it reduces the risk of password being exposed for your privileged accounts so that no one else can use it and those passwords are not shared with other users. As we talk about all these principles, automation is also important. It talks when it comes to life cycle management scale. So what does the life cycle mean in identity space? So when a user or an employee is onboarded, so that's the onboarding. Then throughout the tenure, there could be some, let's say, job change or switch. So that could be a part of moving a mover as a part of lifecycle management. And once someone gets offboarded, that's a part of leaving the process. So from joining to leaving, the entire thing is getting automated and managed through governance tools like SailPoint, Savian in the organization. So it ensures that the provisioning, getting into the system, deprovisioning, when someone leaves the organization, it automatically takes out all the access. So no one has to go and request to the system to remove the access. So it ties to the systems in the organization, let's say Workday, then HR tool, whichever tool manages the users life cycle, like when the person joins, when the person leaves. So all the IAM tools integrated with that, and it does the synchronization every day and removes the access automatically. So no, previously managers had to go and do some request to the particular teams to remove the access. Now it's all automated and it ensures that it happens immediately. So when let's say someone is terminated immediately, so The lifecycle management ensures that all the access are being lost. So the person doesn't take any important confidential data from the organization, which he or she is not supposed to take. And this reduces the risk. So when we talk about automation, lifecycle management, it adds another aspect there, that is access reviews. So what we do in organizations is we roll out access review for a quarterly basis, or like 6 months, one year, depending on the type of access. So access reviews go to all the owners of those particular access. Let's say it could be a manager or director or data owner, to ensure those users who have the right access, right now, are those the users who actually need the access, or they need to be removed. So this happens on a periodic basis to keep in mind the audit and compliance are being met. And as I talk about, this is about the users, but we do this not only to users, to all the service accounts which are used for accessing some period access. We also use this across applications to ensure like the access to the applications are intact and is getting reviewed on a continuous basis. So we spoke about the overview of the IAM and the cloud. What are the challenges we faced? What are the best core principles? Now we talk about best practices of implementing those principles to get rid of the challenges we spoke about. And the challenges do exist, and it takes time to implement that. So the organization where I work, we started IAM like 2 years back, and still we are having a lot of challenges to onboard the users, because there are teams who are used to using the old legacy systems. So they are not ready to upgrade or do the changes at their end. There are applications which are using the old authentication or login protocols. So they are not ready to invest their time and energy and the resource to move to IAM. So the challenges still exist, and we are moving towards it to accomplish what other IAM best practices in the organization. So the first one is centralized identity management across cloud providers. So we talked about there are different cloud providers like AWS, Azure, GCP. So having a centralized identity management is important when you have the accounts across the cloud providers. So this creates consistencies and eliminate the silos. So what are the things that we do for centralized identity management are role-based access control and attribute-based access control. So role-based access control is in a simpler term based on your job title. Let's say you are a developer, you need some access. You are a engineer, you need some other access. So it is based on the role-based access control, and it should always align with the principle of least access. Even in the developer, there could be someone who is a senior developer or a team lead. So their access could be different. So we define personas in the organization, and we bundle the access based on that persona. So when someone goes to, let's say, SailPoint as a tool to request access, they look for that particular role and request access, and it goes to the right approvers. And once it's approved, it's automatically provisioned. Now, next is attribute-based access control. There are some cases where we cannot define access based on a job title or a role. We go more granular to the base of the attributes. Attributes are more functions like you will be a, let's say, employer or a contractor, or which hierarchy you're a part of. So it's more than the role, and we look at other parameters that could be a possibility. So when we implement all this RBAC and ABAC, it's also important to continuously monitor access reviews. As I talked about in the previous slide, the organizations do access reviews on a quarterly, 6-month, or an yearly basis, and they continuously monitor the access. And when someone moves across ladder or they change the team, the access is being removed. So there are ways to do it on an ad hoc basis or on a regular basis. So for that, it's also important that all the teams collaborate together. Which in our case, we work with teams who are engineers, SREs, developers, who use various cloud platforms. So we need to have a good collaboration with them to ensure that we are aligning with the audit and the access reviews. MFA. So MFA is like a multi-factor authentication, as I spoke about in the previous slide. When we talk about single sign-on across multiple applications, we are using a set username and password. But once that is done, it goes through a second factor of authentication. Let's say you get authenticated on email or phone or through the authenticated app. So this applies not just to a user account, as well as non-human accounts, let's say service accounts or any other accounts, the APIs that are being used. And the last one would be to integrate these practices with all the DevOps and CI/CD pipelines. That's when we work with all the engineering team to do integrate the best practices with their pipeline. Yeah. So next is when we have a centralized platform, how does the federated identity, which were in silos, work in action? So if you see that the diagram, not a diagram, the flow chart, a user identity provider in the cloud applications. So user logs in with an identity provider. Let's say I'm logging to an application and I provide my username and password, and it goes to the authenticator. So that authenticator will try to look for my account in that application, if my account exists or not. So they will do the call at the backend, and that's when it gets authenticated and I can access the particular application. So there are a process that happens in the backend when I provide my credentials. So they will check if that user exists in the database or not. Once it's authenticated, and it happens in a fraction of a second, and I'll get the access to the application. So what the provider does, it identity provider at the backend, they issue tokens and which allow access to the cloud applications. There are different benefits out of it. Reduced password fatigue. So we are not going to use multiple passwords, and there are no risks of password being exposed because we are going through second factor of authentication, which leads to stronger security. And it's a simpler process to get onboarded to the application and get offboarded, because I can use it as long as my identity and my details exist in the system. And as I'm removed, we can get it offboarded automatically. So there are a couple of protocols that are being used in the backend. For single sign-on, we use like SAML, OAuth 2.0, OIDC, and that connects across the providers. Talking about the compliance, we have been talking compliance a lot of slides. So compliance is a major driver for IAM initiatives. To meet the requirements, we should be IAM ready. The policy should be audit ready. It's not. So when it comes to, we talk about the policies. So it starts with a basic level. Let's say, I'll give an example of Google Cloud. How does that work is, we have a principle where it can be user, service account, or a group. And that principle gets access to certain permissions based on their roles. And once the roles are defined on the granular level, let's say someone needs to go to Google BigQuery and do some edit permission, whereas someone will just need a view permission. So those roles and permissions are defined, and that's when the policies are applied. So the Google IAM team who is working on the Google Cloud or any other cloud, they will define the policies in a way that is audit ready, right? So, and that also ensures that is automated provision and deprovision with the real-time reporting. So we use a lot of real-time reporting tools, like Cloud Platform, they have their own tool, like Google Cloud has a tool. In our organization, the Cloud Platform we are using, the cloud service provider have a collaboration with visualizations tool like Automatic Tenable, and that gives an oversight, a real-time oversight on a daily basis. Let's say how many accounts are being onboarded, how many are facing a security challenge. Among that accounts, how many are critical accounts that needs immediate attention, less critical. So that dashboard gives the holistic overview for the management and the team to act on which account, what should be the next plan of action for next 1 month. Okay, we have this many inactive users who are not using their access, so they should be eliminated. These are the users, these are the accounts which are not being used for a long time, or they are being shared across users. So those insights we get through all this reporting tool. And once that is done, so we have dashboards created in, let's say, Power BI and other cloud native tools to showcase to the executive. So this is what the progress we have made. These were the accounts were not used properly. These didn't have any owners. These have extra permissions. So we address compliance through all our reporting and taking action as and when required. So that was something I was talking about, the few use cases that we're using in the organization with cloud and other applications. So I was also having a discussion on a financial enterprise with one of my colleagues who is working on a financial project. So in financial sector, there's a major challenge of migrating IAM to cloud with legacy systems because their security plays an important role. And the legacy systems were not designed for federated identity. And because of regulations in financial sector, it's a major blocker to move to adopting IAM practices. So what we got to know when we did a case study was there were so many orphan accounts. When we talk about orphan accounts, there are accounts who don't have any owner. They are being unused for years and the passwords have not been changed or rotated. So those are orphan accounts and they pose a great security risk because even though they are not used, they could be used at any time and they could have more access than they should have because they are not being revised continuously. So these were the major challenge that we found in the one of the financial project that we were working on. So by consolidating IAM into a unified system, we reduce the number of orphan accounts drastically to in the first phase to 80% and eventually 100%. We streamlined all the audit and it was also a good productivity boost. So we spoke about all the challenges, best practices, some real life examples. So I'll conclude talking about the key takeaways. So I am like identity access is not just a business enabler. It is more than that. It's also IT control. It enables a business to have every systems together. And it should be viewed as an integrator across systems, across users, and across applications. Zero trust principles must be adopted. Like, don't trust it first, validate the access before giving more access. So this is very important. Trust no one, verify everything. And third, it's a journey. So it doesn't get adopted in one day, 1 month, or a year. It needs continuously monitoring and adjusting the policies, how systems are getting access, how technical requirements are changing, and especially with AI, a lot of data are getting available online. So we have to restrict how what data is getting used and what is getting uploaded outside. So this is important to align the IAM policies with the continuous monitoring and the policy updates and balancing the agility with security. So the successful organizations do both, and this is what one of the principles that my organization is trying to achieve is to be agile, also being secured. That's all I had from my end. Thank you so much for your time. So I'm open to questions.